let's have a look at when we click something like this, how the context menu over here changes. So you've seen before, if we go to anchor, it's basically the position of an anchor. But when we click the model itself, then this view changes and it offers us a variety of different options that we're going to try to cover quickly. So first of all, and that's an important one for all the different elements in your scene, you can give a name to the object that you're using here, right? And although you don't have to do that by default, you see like the position anchor is a position anchor and the object is an object one and the 3D model is a 3D model. It really helps to keep your scene tidy, specifically when you add 20 plus different media and 3D objects and media items. And when you now create interactivity, depending on what you're looking at, what you're tapping at, it really helps to have a better and clearer understanding over here. What is what. So let's give this not a name yet because we don't know what it's going to be, but we're going to come back to this very shortly. So you can always put in a name, press enter, and you'll see right next to the 3D model, it showcases the name that you just typed in. So below you have the different transform options that you can also lock. You can lock the scale, you can play with the rotation, either by just like dragging around the gizmo and playing with it, or by typing in certain values. And the vertical alignment is an interesting one. So basically what this means is by default, it always is, the object is positioned where, well, you position it as the creator. But if you go for floor, it will always stick to the floor. And if you go to eye level, it will always be positioned at the height of the camera. This is in particular interesting if you, for example, create a scavenger hunt, right? Like if you want objects to be in reach because people need to collect them and you don't know if your users are going to be very tall or if they're going to be kids. So in these cases, you can make use of the vertical alignment to be sure that your objects are always in reach. Now, if you press none, it will just not have any vertical alignment constraints. And if we scroll further a bit down, we see the alignment constraints where we have billboard and look at. Now this is particularly interesting for media files, which I'm going to show you in a second. But billboard basically means that wherever you, as the user, are, the model or the media type is going to look at. So it's always, by default, going to look at you, the user, which can be crucial if, for example, you're inserting characters or if you're inserting elements where it's important that users can always, no matter where they're at in the scene, always look and read what's on there. Now, the look at functionality and alignment constraint does a similar thing, with the difference that you cannot just look at the camera, what basically billboard is, but you can also look at other elements in your scene. Meaning you see like this is the 3D model that we uploaded here, but it can also face the media type or another object. So again, if you have a character that's animated and is moving around in your scene, and you basically have another object that has the look at alignment constraint, it will always look at the other object, which can be quite useful when building immersive stories. Then the transition smoothing basically allows or gives you a bit more control over how much it's like really sticking to the object, or if it's like slowly also turning in the direction that the object is for a more natural look. If you scroll a bit further down, you can see that this 3D model, right now it's just like our default model, has different options, right? So you can exchange that for a primitive, and that primitive you can change to horizontal, vertical plane, box, and spheres. You can also use integrated assets that are in there. In that case, where they go, there's coins, crystals, emeralds, dices, and rubies, and stars. And particularly interesting if you want to build scavenger hunts. You can also choose a custom model, which again, by default is this one. But if you choose a custom model, it will also, a button will appear that when you click it, will open your asset library. And your asset library is the place where, as the name suggests, all your assets, may that be media types, may that be 3D models, all of that kind of stuff, sits, and where all that stuff is living. It also indicates with the little symbols unique elements about these assets. So for example, when you see this little symbol appearing here, this icon, it basically means that this model has an animation, has an integrated animation. So for the sake of simplicity, let's add this plane to the scene, and boom, it's in there. And it even automatically copies the name, as you can see. Like that would have been my next step, to rename it to toy plane, but it automatically does this for you. Now, this is our animated plane. Right now we don't see the animation, but when we preview the scene, which we're going to do shortly, then you'll see that there is an animation included. If we go back basically to the settings view that adapts. In that case, we clicked the 3D model, so it adapts to the 3D model. And we scroll further down, you can set the opacity, maybe that be to 1, meaning like it's fully opaque and like it's fully rendered. But you can also put 0.5, and you'll see when we make it bigger, like it gets kind of translucent. So put this back to 1. We want our plane to be actually in there, not see-through. That could feel dangerous if you're sitting in the plane. And below that, you see a limited compatibility as like a little info box, right? And when you click it, it shows you again what we know from like the context selection from the very beginning. So you see that this opacity feature in particular only works on iOS versions of 18 and higher, also only works on macOS 15 and higher, but is fully compatible on visionOS and is not yet there on Android. So keep an eye out for these little views, because specifically if you're designing an experience for a specific platform or max reach is really important for you, make sure to only use what your user base can also basically open and run. If you scroll further down, you see a fitting box. By default, there's none. You can also set a fitting box around objects that will reduce the size of it to whatever values you put in here. And this can come in really handy when you export a 3D model from whatever 3D tool that might be, and something got wrong with the scale, and it's humongous. It's like 1,000 by 1,000 meters. So that would be a teeny tiny bit too big for the scene and for the view here in Scenery. So for these projects, for these 3D models in particular, you can choose a fitting box to alt squeeze it in a certain size. By default, let's choose none. And with a pivot adjustment below that, you basically define where the origin point of that 3D model is, right? So is that basically at the bottom? Is that at the top? You'll see like it updates, gizmo goes to the very top, or is it in the center of the object? Let's put it back to bottom, scroll up a bit, zoom out a bit, and there we go. So next section is lighting and shadows. So below that, you can define if you want shadows to render for your 3D model. As you can see, casting dynamic light shadows, grounding shadows, and receiving grounding shadows is all optional. It again depends a bit on which platform you're on. To increase realism, we definitely suggest to enable shadows. That being said, though, sometimes that can be a very compute-intense task. And depending on the complexity of your overall scene, this is an ability for you to optimize and to maybe squeeze out a bit more performance, specifically in experiences where you maybe not necessarily need, in that case, the shadows. So have a look here. You can always like unfold and fold these menus up to keep everything nice and tidy. Below that, we'll see like animations. So every object, once it's added to the scene, has a reveal animation. And if an object disappears from the scene, then you also have a removal animation. And the default is that the model scales up and at the same time fades in. Like that's a very subtle and nice introduction of a model to the scene. In some cases, though, you maybe don't want any of of a reveal animation at all, right? Maybe you just want to place the content in there, or you just want to make it appear but without the scaling and just the fade in. So all of these things you can define here on the right-hand side. Between fade and scale, disable completely, or basically choose a default. You can also decide if model animations are being autoplayed and if they loop under the animations tab over here. And if you go further down, like you'll see material overrides, where you can choose different face culling options and where you can add custom materials. Now, materials is something that we're going to dive a bit deeper in shortly. So let's get back to this in a bit.